Ethan Cole stood before the vast chamber of the Council of Worlds and looked at the endless rows of alien faces staring at him. With a mix of confusion, pride, and disbelief, he felt the weight of every world, every colony, and every promise humanity had made and broken, and he knew that once he spoke there would be no way back. He took a breath and his voice echoed through the great hall, telling them that humanity would no longer be a part of their grand experiment, that the people of Earth and its colonies were leaving the council effective immediately. The sound of his words seemed to hang in the air, heavier than the artificial gravity of the chamber. The delegates began to murmur in many voices, some sharp, some cold, some mocking. One of them, a tall silver-skinned being from the Ral species, asked if this was a joke. Another, with glittering eyes from the Terek system, said that humans were too emotional to understand how things worked. Ethan did not respond with anger. Spoke simply and clearly. He said that for too long humans had given more than they received, that their fleets guarded borders that were not theirs, that their engineers built ships that others claimed credit for, that their medicine saved lives, while their own colonies starved, and that when they asked for fairness they were called impatient when they demanded respect. They were called dangerous. He said that humans had seen enough. He said that from now on, humanity would take care of itself, and not of others. The hall burst into laughter mixed with outrage. Some shouted that humans were reckless, that they could not survive alone. Others said good riddance. A few sat silent and thoughtful. One of them was Kay Len, an Avran diplomat whose people valued logic more than pride. He watched the human ambassador walk away with calm eyes, but inside, he felt a strange unease, as if the stars themselves had shifted when the humans finally left the chamber. A silence spread that none dared to break. For the first time in centuries, the Council of Worlds lost one of its founding members, and no one knew what that truly meant. Outside the chamber, the human delegation walked through the long corridors of the Citadel, their footsteps echoing. Against metal walls, they passed alien envoys whispering in disbelief and human guards standing tall with unreadable faces. Ethan looked at his aide, a young officer named Laura Price, and told her to send the final signal to Earth. The message was, "Short humanity withdraws effective now." She nodded and her fingers danced across the console when the transmission was confirmed. Ethan felt a wave of relief and sadness. He thought of Earth, of the oceans he had not seen in years, of the children, growing up under the shadow of council control. He promised himself that one day they would be free to decide their own fate, without foreign voices telling them what was right and what was efficient. When they reached the human dockyards, the ships waited like silent giants, dark gray hulls gleaming under station lights, each one marked with the symbol of Earth, and the colonies a blue circle with a white star in the center. The crews moved quickly, loading data cores, cargo, and supplies. No one spoke much. Every person knew what was happening and why the engines ignited one by one, and the sound of their power filled the station like thunder. As the last ship detached from the dock, the Citadel trembled slightly from the force Kalen watched. From an observation deck, he saw the human fleet form a long line stretching into the void, their formation perfect, their lights fading into the black. He thought they looked like a storm moving away, leaving a calm that felt wrong around him. Other diplomats whispered about trade agreements and resource shortages, but Kalen could not focus. He asked his aide what would happen to the council. Now the aide replied that nothing would change, that humans were only one species among many, but Kalen remembered history. He remembered that it was human engineers who had repaired the energy grids of dying worlds, that it was human fleets that had stopped the pirate wars, that it was human scientists who had shared the cure for the plague, that nearly wiped out 3 species. He wondered who would do those things now. On Earth, the news spread like fire across cities and colonies. People gathered in streets watching the announcement broadcast from orbit. Many cheered, waving flags and banners. Others were afraid of what leaving the council might bring. Ethan returned to Earth for the first time in years, standing in the great square of New Geneva where a crowd waited to hear him speak. He told them that humanity was free again, that they would build their own future with their own hands. He promised that they would not bow to any alien rule again. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of every lost ship, every insult, every sacrifice. The crowd shouted his name, and for a moment he believed they could really make it alone. Days turned into weeks. The Council of Worlds adjusted trade routes and sent messages to other species. reassuring them that everything was stable, yet small cracks began to show. Ships, delayed cargo, missing disputes over borders once managed by human patrols now went unresolved. Small wars flickered like sparks in the dark. Kalen tried to warn the council that losing the humans would have consequences, but the senior members dismissed his concern. They said that humans were dramatic and replaceable, that their technology could be copied and their tactics imitated. But Kalen had worked with humans. He knew that their strength came not from machines, but from something harder to define, a mix of stubbornness, creativity, and the strange belief that even the impossible could be done. He had seen it in their eyes, in the way they faced danger without backing down. Meanwhile, in human space, silence grew between stars. Colonies stopped transmitting with the council. New communication networks were built under the name of the Terran Accord fleets, where reorganized industries shifted from export to defense. Many thought it was a mistake to isolate themselves, but most followed the new plan because for the first time in generations, humans felt united. Not as soldiers of the council, but as people of Earth and its colonies. Ethan visited shipyards on Mars, orbital foundries above Luna, and research stations. On Titan, he saw the future being built piece by piece. Stronger ships, smarter machines, and a new spirit that said, "Never again." Kalen received reports of strange movements near the human borders. Traders said that no one could enter human space, any more that automated drones warned intruders to leave. That whole sectors had gone dark. Some said the humans were hiding weapons. Others said they were hiding from something greater. The council decided to send probes, but none returned. Kalen watched these events unfold with a growing sense of dread. He wondered if the humans had cut themselves off to protect something or to prepare for something. The council ignored the warnings and moved on with business meetings and politics as usual. Evening. Kalen stood before the great window of the citadel and looked toward the direction of Sol, the human home system. From that distance, it was just another star, faint and unremarkable, yet he felt that something powerful slept there. Something the council had never understood. He remembered a human saying once that, when a door closes, another opens, but sometimes what comes through is not what you expect. He thought of Ethan Cole and the calm certainty in his eyes when he spoke of leaving. He realized that the humans had not left in anger but in purpose. They had seen what was coming and had chosen to step away, to build in silence, and perhaps one day to return. In the dark of space, the human fleets continued their long journey home, engines burning quietly against the void, and as the last ship vanished from the range of council sensors, the universe seemed to hold its breath, waiting for whatever would come next. Kalen sat in his office on the Citadel, surrounded by data screens filled with reports from across the galaxy. It had been 2 years since the humans left the Council, and though the chambers of the Great Alliance still looked the same, something inside them felt empty. The familiar noise of human voices, the constant arguing and questions and ideas that once filled the meetings were gone, and in their absence the silence felt heavier every day. Many in the Council acted as if nothing had changed, but Kalen could see it in the numbers. Trade between worlds was falling. Disputes were rising and small border conflicts were breaking out between species that had not fought for centuries. He leaned back in his chair and looked at a small blue light blinking on the edge of his desk, a report from the frontier colonies. Another incident, another system in trouble. He opened the file and read that a convoy of cargo ships had vanished near the Orun Belt. It was an old trade route, protected once by human patrols but now guarded by no one. Pirates had taken advantage of the gap, their ships fast and brutal, striking with precision and vanishing into dark space. The Council tried to send patrols from other species, but they lacked coordination and the pirates always escaped. Kalen sighed and thought about how much the Council had relied on humans without realizing it. They had been the glue that held everything together. Their fleets, their engineers, their negotiators, and their strange human ability to adapt to chaos. The Council thought itself stable, but it was only stable because humans were always fixing what others broke. Kalen sent a message to the Security Committee warning them again that something had to be done. He wrote that the Council was not designed to work without human discipline, but when the answer came, it was the same as before, a polite dismissal. The message said that the situation was temporary, that new patrols were being organized, That the council did not need to depend on any single species, he closed the message. Feeling tired and frustrated, he had always admired the humans, though he never fully understood them. They had a way of turning weakness into strength and failure, into opportunity. Now that they were gone, the galaxy seemed to be missing that spark. Across the stars, life without humans became harder. Reactors that used human-designed energy cores began to fail. Small errors grew into large problems. Many worlds lacked the knowledge to repair them. Since most engineers who knew how to do so were human or trained by them, medical facilities ran low on supplies once imported from human colonies, and without those materials, new diseases spread in places that had not seen sickness in generations. The council tried to cover up the growing crisis, saying it was just a period of adjustment, but ordinary people across the galaxy began to whisper that things had been better when humans were still part of. The council Kalen met with other diplomats in quiet meetings away from the grand chambers. Some of them agreed that the situation was worsening, but few dared to speak openly. The council did not like to admit mistakes. They all feared losing their status. Kalen wondered if pride would destroy them all before they realized what they had lost one night, while he studied new reports from the Outer Rim. He received a private transmission. The signal was weak and distorted, but the origin code was human. He hesitated before opening it when the image appeared. It showed a dark figure with a familiar symbol behind them, a blue circle with a white star, the same that used to mark human ships. The voice was distorted, but the words were clear. "You wanted the galaxy without us, now live with what you've made." Before Kalen could respond, the signal vanished. He tried to trace it, but the source disappeared like smoke in the wind. He sat there staring at the empty screen, wondering if it was real or some cruel trick. But deep inside he felt a chill because he knew it was not a threat, it was a warning. Meanwhile, the council tried to expand into the sectors. Once occupied by humans, they wanted access to the resources and routes that humans had controlled, but every attempt failed. Automated defense grids and drones blocked entry, and some ships that ignored the warnings were never seen again. Probes sent to investigate transmitted only static before disappearing. Rumors began to spread among traders and captains. They said that humans had built something enormous in the dark, something powerful and hidden, entire fleets moving like ghosts through the void. Others said that humans had found new allies outside known space, species even more advanced that now worked with them. No one could confirm any of it. But fear grew faster than truth. Kalen decided to travel to one of the frontier worlds that bordered human space. The planet of Talvos once served as a trade hub between human merchants and Avran scientists. Now its docks were empty and its stations silent. He arrived in orbit aboard a small diplomatic vessel and looked down at the dusty surface. The cities below were half abandoned with only a few lights still flickering. He met with the local governor, an old Tarek named Huron, who told him that trade had dried up since the humans left. They used to bring tools, medicine, and food. Now nothing came through and the economy was dying. Huron said that sometimes at night their sensors picked up strange energy signatures from the direction of human space, as if something massive was powering up. Kalen listened carefully and asked if any contact had been made. Huron said no. The humans had closed their borders completely. No signals, no ships, nothing. It was as if they had vanished from the galaxy. When Kalen returned to the Citadel, he brought his report to the Council Assembly, but the high members barely listened. One of them laughed and said that humans were playing games, that they would come crawling back when they needed the Council again. Another said that the humans were probably fighting among themselves. Kalen did not argue. He simply said that they were making a mistake, and that the galaxy would pay for it. Soon he left the chamber feeling the same cold unease that had haunted him since the day Ethan Cole walked out of the council hall. Weeks passed, and the tension in the galaxy grew. Entire sectors fell into chaos. Piracy became an industry. Warlords took control of weaker worlds. Trade routes turned dangerous. Even the great central systems began to feel the pressure. Fuel shortages, food shortages, and riots broke out. While the council argued about responsibility, Kalen tried to find any sign of human communication, but there was nothing, only silence and the faint memory of the message he had received. He began to wonder what the humans were doing in their hidden space, and whether they watched as the galaxy fell apart. On the edge of known space, a convoy of council ships tried to pass near the border of human territory. They were carrying supplies to a colony that had not received aid in months when they entered a dark sector their sensors detected. Something enormous moving in the distance. They tried to identify it, but their systems went offline one by one. A cold voice came through their speakers. Unidentified vessels. You are entering restricted human space. Turn back now. They ignored the warning and continued forward. The next moment, their screens filled with light, then darkness. Only one ship managed to escape. Its crew said they saw shadows of ships larger than anything they had ever imagined, moving without sound like ghosts under starlight. When the story reached the council, it was dismissed as hysteria. But Kaylan believed it. He began to collect evidence quietly, speaking with traders, mercenaries, and anyone who had been near human space. All their stories were different, but one thing was always the same. They spoke of silence and power as if humanity had become something vast and unreachable. Kaylan knew that the council could not keep pretending forever. The cracks were becoming fractures, and soon everything would collapse. He looked once more toward the direction of the human star and whispered that maybe they had all made the greatest mistake in history. Captain Ro Varric stood on the bridge of his ship, the Saran Dawn, staring at the dark edge of human space through the wide observation glass. His crew moved quietly around him, their faces tense and uncertain. No one liked being this close to the human borders. But the council had ordered an expedition to find out what had become of the abandoned sectors. Ro had volunteered, partly because he was curious, and partly because he wanted to prove that the council still had control over its territories, though in truth he felt the same unease that had spread across the galaxy since the humans left. Every story he had heard about the new human space spoke of silence, of ships that vanished, of sensors that failed without reason. Still, he told himself that he was a soldier, not a child afraid of ghost stories. The fleet of 5 ships drifted through the cold dark between stars, their engines humming softly. The communication officers tried to reach any human signal, but received only static. Ro ordered a scan of the nearest planet, once a human colony called Haven 9. The scanners showed cities but no life. The atmosphere was stable, the buildings untouched, yet no movement, no heat, no sound. Ro ordered a landing team. He went with them, descending through gray clouds to a city that looked frozen in time. Ships stood in hangars, doors half open, lights flickering weakly, as if the power systems had been running without purpose for years. They found food in stores, machines still working, and even records in the databanks, but no people. It was as if everyone had walked away one day and never returned. One of the crew whispered that it felt like a grave. Ro agreed, but said nothing. They searched for days, moving from one settlement to another, all empty, all silent. The only signs of life were automated drones patrolling the skies and warning them to leave. The voice of the drones was calm and cold. This world is closed by order of the Terran Accord. Unauthorized presence will result in removal. The message repeated again and again. Ro tried to open communication, but every signal was blocked. On the 4th day, one of the ships in orbit sent a distress call saying their systems had gone offline. Ro rushed back to the surface shuttle and returned to orbit, but by the time they arrived, the ship was gone. No explosion, no debris, just gone. The remaining crews were shaken. Ro tried to keep order, but fear had started to spread that night. While the fleet stayed in silent formation, Ro stood alone on the bridge looking out at the stars. He thought of the stories from old human explorers who had spoken about the endless will of their kind, how they would always push forward no matter what. He wondered what they were pushing toward now. Then a voice came through the communication line. It was soft but clear. Unidentified vessels, you are trespassing in restricted Terran space state. Your purpose? Ro hesitated, then answered that they were explorers of the Council, seeking contact and peace. The voice replied, peace was lost when the Council chose pride over truth. You are not welcome here. Then the transmission ended and the sensors detected movement, hundreds of contacts surrounding them, ships appearing out of the dark without lights, without sound. The bridge crew gasped as massive shapes came into view. Human ships, but nothing like the ones the Council had known. Their designs were sharp and heavy, built for war and speed. The symbols on their hulls glowed faint blue, the same circle and star. but now surrounded by lines that formed wings. Ro ordered all ships to power down weapons and engines. The human voice returned again. "Leave now and tell your council that the stars beyond this border are no longer theirs." Ro obeyed. He gave the retreat order and the fleet turned away. The human ships did not chase. They simply watched until the council ships crossed back into neutral space. When they looked back, the human fleet was gone as if it had never been there. When they returned to the Citadel, Ro reported everything to the council, but most of the members refused to believe him. They said it was impossible that humans could have built such fleets in so little time. Some said he was lying. Others said he had been tricked by pirates, but Kalen, who sat in the back of the chamber, believed every word. He approached Ro later and asked him quietly what he truly saw. Ro told him that it felt like the humans had changed. They were not hiding in fear, they were guarding something greater. Kalen asked if he thought they would attack. Ro shook his head and said no, they do not need to attack, they are waiting. Kalen thanked him and walked away. His mind filled with unease as months passed, more ships disappeared near human borders. Entire patrols gone without a trace. The council tried to blame pirates, but everyone knew it was something else. Trade between the remaining worlds fell even further. Technology that depended on human designs continued to fail. People began to whisper that the humans had cursed the galaxy before leaving. Kalen knew it was not a curse. It was neglect. The council had built its strength on human effort, and when that support was gone, everything started to crumble. He began to gather information, secretly recording reports and testimonies from travelers who had seen flashes of light deep in the dark, from soldiers who had intercepted strange coded signals, always from the same direction. One day he received an encrypted message from a source he did not recognize. It contained coordinates near the border of human space, and one line of text: "They are building." The future Kalen hesitated for hours before deciding to go. He boarded a small scout ship with only 2 crew and set course for the coordinates after 3 days of travel. They reached an empty sector, but then the sensors picked up an energy signature larger than any station Kalen had ever seen. They approached carefully, and what appeared on the screen made everyone fall silent. A structure the size of a moon floating in darkness. Thousands of lights glimmering across its surface. It was not a planet, not a station. Something between both endless metal and power. The scanners could not identify the materials used. It emitted no communication signal. Yet their sensors felt waves of energy like a heartbeat. Kalen realized this was what the humans had been building. He tried to record data, but suddenly the ship's systems froze. A calm voice filled the cockpit. "Unauthorized vessel. Detected. You are in violation of Terran Dominion space leave." Immediately Cullen tried to speak, but the system shut down engines, offline life support. Frozen, the ship drifted helplessly. Then a beam of light surrounded them and pushed them away gently but firmly. When power returned, they were far from the structure. The voice spoke one last time. "Tell your council we are not coming back. We are moving forward." Kalen stared at the dark behind them as they turned for home. His mind racing, he now understood that humanity had not abandoned the galaxy. They had simply outgrown it. They were no longer bound by the petty politics of the council. They were building something beyond its reach. He thought about what would happen when the rest of the galaxy realized this truth, and whether the council would try to stop them or beg them to return. He knew one thing for certain: whatever the humans were becoming, they were not the same species that had once argued for fairness and unity in the council halls. They had found a new purpose, and they would never again bow to anyone. When Kalen returned to the Citadel, he told no one what he had seen. He simply filed a brief report saying the area was empty and dangerous and should be avoided. He feared that if the council knew the truth, they would act out of fear and provoke something they could not control. He kept his secret and watched. As the galaxy continued to sink deeper into chaos, the stars were growing colder, trade dying, hope fading. He often looked toward the edge of space, wondering if the humans watched too, and if they felt pity or patience as they built their new world in the dark. War began slowly at first, like a sickness that no one noticed until it was too late. Small disputes over trade routes turned into battles. Whole sectors started closing borders, and the council could no longer control its member worlds. The absence of humans had left a hole that could not be filled. Every attempt to create unity failed because no one trusted each other, and without human fleets to enforce peace, old grudges came alive again. Kalen watched the chaos unfold from the Citadel, his reports piling up faster than he could read them. Colonies attacked pirates, turning into small armies. Communication lines breaking and governments falling one after another. The galaxy that once called itself united was now tearing itself apart. Piece by piece, he often thought about the humans and wondered if they were watching this too, and whether they felt sorrow or satisfaction seeing what had become of the alliance they had built. The council chambers were filled with shouting, the delegates blaming one another for everything. The trade ministers argued about lost cargo. The defense committee accused rival fleets of aggression, and the chair of the council tried to calm them, but her voice was drowned in noise. Kalen stood at the edge of the room, listening to their endless words and thinking how empty they sounded when the humans had been part of the council. These meetings had been loud too, but at least there had been direction. There had been purpose. Now there was only fear and pride. No one dared to admit the truth that without the humans, the council was nothing more than a fragile idea slowly breaking apart. Outside the Citadel, the galaxy burned, entire systems falling into chaos. Kalen received messages from planets he once visited begging for help, but there was nothing he could do. The council fleets were stretched thin, and many of their ships were breaking down without human engineers to maintain them. He saw reports of reactors malfunctioning, and entire cities going dark. Supplies of food and medicine were running out on dozens of worlds. He tried to speak in the council meetings, urging them to reach out to the humans to ask for aid, or at least for advice, but his words were met with silence or laughter. The others told him that humans had abandoned them and that it would be weakness to crawl back now. He spent nights staring out the wide window of his quarters, watching the stars flicker and fade one by one as wars consumed. Then he thought about the message he had once received, the voice that had said, "Live with what you have made." He now understood what it meant. They had built a world of arrogance, and now it was crumbling under its own weight. One day, the council received a distress call from the outer colonies. 3 major worlds were under attack by unknown forces. Fleets were clashing across the borders, and no one knew who had fired. First, Kalen suspected it was the start of something larger. The council sent reinforcements, but they were too late by the time they arrived. The planets were ashes, billions dead. The survivors spoke of ships with markings of multiple species attacking each other. Without reason, Kalen knew then that it was no longer war between nations, it was war between everyone and everyone. The chaos spread faster than anyone could stop it. Worlds cut communication to protect themselves. Trade routes turned into battlegrounds and refugees flooded into neutral systems. The council declared martial law but had no power to enforce it. The Citadel became a fortress guarded by ships that barely trusted their own allies. Kalen walked through the empty halls, once filled with laughter and music, now echoing with alarms. He thought of Ethan Cole, the human ambassador who had once stood here and warned them that this would happen. He wished he had listened more carefully. Then came the day when the sensors on the outer rim detected something strange. Enormous energy signatures, moving together across human space. They were too large to be normal fleets, too synchronized to be random. Kalen was in the control room when the report arrived. He read the data and felt his heart stop. The readings were unmistakable. The humans were on the move, thousands of ships heading toward the border, but not in attack formation. It looked more like a wave spreading out in all directions. The council panicked. Some said it was an invasion. Others said it was salvation. Kalen did not know which one to hope for. Within hours, transmissions flooded every communication channel at once, clear and strong. A single symbol appeared on every screen. The blue circle and white star of Earth surrounded by new lines that looked like wings, and beneath it words written in every language of the council. "We are the Terran Dominion. We come not in anger, but in order." The message repeated across every world, followed by silence. Then the first human fleets appeared in the outer sectors, there, ships massive, sleek and silent. They did not attack, they simply moved through space, restoring power grids, repairing damaged relays, and forcing warring fleets to stand down. The pirates who had plagued the galaxy vanished within days. No one knew how the humans found them or what happened to them. Only that they never returned. Kalen stood before the viewing deck as dozens of human ships entered Citadel orbit. They moved with perfect precision, their hulls reflecting the starlight like polished mirrors. The largest ship approached slowly and transmitted a message requesting to speak to the council. The chair reluctantly agreed, and the doors of the grand chamber opened once more for a human delegation led by Ethan Cole, now older, his hair gray, his face marked by time, but his eyes as sharp as ever. He wore a black uniform bearing the same symbol of the Terran Dominion. He walked to the center of the room and looked around at the alien faces that had once mocked him. No one spoke until he began. He said that humanity had not come to conquer but to end the chaos. He said they had left because they wanted freedom, and now they returned because the galaxy had lost balance. He said that the Terran Dominion would not rejoin the Council but would restore order on its own terms. He spoke calmly, without pride, without anger, his voice steady and unshakable. He told them that humanity had built a new system, one that could not be corrupted by greed or fear. He said that the Council would continue to exist, but it would no longer rule. It would only advise, and if any species chose war, the Dominion would end it before it began. His words were simple, yet filled with power. No one dared to argue. After the meeting, Kalen found Ethan standing near the great window looking out at the stars. He walked to him and said that the galaxy had changed. Ethan smiled faintly and said yes, and it will change again. He asked him if the humans had planned all this. Ethan shook his head and said no, we only prepared for what was always coming. Kalen asked him what that meant. Ethan looked at him with calm eyes and said that humans had learned one truth when the Council fell apart. The universe does not need peace, it needs balance, and sometimes balance comes from strength. Outside the Citadel, the human fleet spread across the stars, rebuilding what was broken, enforcing quiet where there had been war. Their ships restored communication relays, repaired power networks, and cleared trade routes. Within weeks, the chaos began to fade. The galaxy was still afraid, but it also began to breathe again. No one could deny that the humans had done what no one else could. They had brought order where the Council had failed. Kalen watched them and knew that this was only the beginning. Humanity had returned, but not as the servants of the Council. They had come back as something greater, something the galaxy would never forget. Kalen woke up to a quiet that felt heavier than silence. The war was over, but the peace that followed was strange. The galaxy had stopped fighting, yet no one felt free. The Terran Dominion had brought calm, but also a deep unease. Their fleets stayed in orbit around every major world, silent and unmoving like watchers that never blinked. Humans did not rule openly, but everyone knew their presence was enough to decide the fate of any system. Trade had returned. Communication was restored, and the stars that once burned with explosions now shone again with light. Yet beneath it all, there was fear. The kind of fear that comes when one knows that power has chosen to watch rather than speak. Kalen walked through the corridors of the Citadel and saw human officers among the alien guards. They spoke softly, always polite, but their eyes measured everything, every movement, every sound. The Council still met, but its voice had no weight anymore. Every decision had to be reviewed by human representatives who sat quietly in the corner, never raising their voices, never arguing. Yet no one dared to speak against them. Kalen felt torn between gratitude and guilt. He remembered the chaos before their return, and how humanity had saved them from total collapse, but he also saw what it cost. The galaxy had traded freedom for safety, and no one knew how long that safety would last. Ethan Cole had become something like a legend. His name was whispered with both fear and respect. He no longer attended every meeting, yet his words reached everywhere through messages that seemed to appear before the Council even asked for help. Some said he had retired to a hidden world on the edge of human space. Others said he was still in command of the fleets. Kalen did not know, but one day he received an invitation that made him both curious and uneasy. It came from the Dominion itself, a request for him to visit Earth to speak directly with Ethan. He had never been to the human homeworld before, and the idea of standing where their story began filled him with wonder and dread. The journey took weeks, his ship escorted by silent Dominion cruisers that never spoke and never changed formation. They flew through vast regions of space that glowed with human stations and colonies. He saw worlds, reborn cities shining with clean energy, and massive orbital rings moving in perfect synchronization. Everything he saw was alive and efficient and controlled when they finally reached Earth. He saw a world that no longer looked wounded like it had in the old records. The skies were clear, the oceans deep blue, the continents glowing with light. He could see massive towers reaching into the clouds and ships rising and landing. In endless rhythm, humanity had rebuilt itself into something vast and unified. When Kalen stepped on the surface, he was met by human officers dressed in dark silver uniforms. They greeted him with perfect courtesy and led him through clean roads, lined with trees and silent machines that seemed to think on their own. Everything moved with quiet precision, and he realized that humans had not only rebuilt their world, they had remade their way of life. He was taken to a tall glass structure that overlooked a wide ocean, and there in a simple room stood Ethan Cole, older now, his hair white, his face lined, but his presence still as strong as ever. He smiled faintly when he saw Kalen and said, "Welcome to Earth, Kalen," said the galaxy. "Speaks your name again." Ethan looked out the window and said, "Names do not matter, only results." Kalen asked him what humanity wanted, now that the Dominion had peace in its grasp. Ethan turned to him and said, "Peace is not a goal, it is a condition. That never lasts, we keep it only by staying ready." Kalen asked if humans plan to rule. Ethan said no. "We plan to guide," and to guard, Kalen said, "but some worlds feel that the Dominion controls too much." Ethan said control is an illusion. What they feel is order, and order is not always gentle. Cullen asked him if that was what he had wanted all along. Ethan looked at him for a long moment and said no. "I wanted balance, but balance without strength is a dream, and dreams die easily." They walked together along the shore. Ethan moving slowly, his steps steady and quiet. He spoke of the years after humanity left the council, how they had turned inward, how they had nearly destroyed themselves again until they found unity through necessity. He said that they had learned that cooperation without discipline was chaos, and discipline without empathy was tyranny. So they built a system that balanced both, a system that now stretched beyond Earth to every world they touched. Kalen listened, in silence, feeling both awe and fear. He realized that the Dominion was not just a government. It was an idea, and ideas were harder to defeat than armies. Later that night, Kalen stood on a balcony watching the lights of the human cities stretching. Far into the horizon, he thought about how much they had changed. Once they had been explorers, curious and restless. Now they were guardians, patient and unyielding. He wondered if this was evolution or something else, something colder. Ethan joined him and said that the galaxy was healing. Kalen asked at what cost. Ethan said at the cost of arrogance and indifference. Kalen asked him if the Dominion would ever leave. Ethan said not, until they are ready to live without us. And they are. Not ready yet, Kalen said. Maybe they never will. Ethan said, then we will wait forever. When Kalen returned to the Citadel months later, he found it quieter. The council was smaller. Many worlds had withdrawn, saying they no longer needed to gather. Since the Dominion handled everything, trade disputes were solved before they began. Pirate fleets vanished before they could form rebellions, ended before they could speak. Kalen read reports that human ships had appeared in systems just as riots were about to start, as if they knew the future. He began to suspect that the Dominion's reach went deeper than anyone understood. Perhaps their technology allowed them to see patterns and predict outcomes long before others could react. He wondered if this was how peace was maintained, not by trust but by prediction and control. Still, there were signs of hope. Children from dozens of species were studying together in new schools built by humans. Shared projects were starting to grow again. Old rivalries fading into memory. Kalen visited one of those schools and watched as a young alien and a human child worked together on a small drone. They laughed, without fear, without the shadow of politics, and for a moment, he felt that maybe this was what humanity had meant from the beginning. Maybe this was the future they had been trying to protect. One night, Kalen received a private message from Ethan. It was short and simple. It said, "Remember what we talked about. Balance is never still. It moves like the tide, never forget." That Kalen saved the message and looked out at the stars, thinking of what it meant. The Dominion might last for centuries, but nothing was forever. He wondered what would happen when humans changed again. Because they always did. They evolved faster than any other species he had ever known. And that was both their gift and their danger as time passed. The galaxy settled into a strange calm. No wars, no chaos, no rebellion. Trade flowed freely. Science advanced. New colonies were built beyond the old borders. The stars felt peaceful again, yet in that peace Kalen felt something missing. The spark of disagreement. The fire of discovery. The noise that once filled the halls of the council. Maybe peace had taken too much, maybe it had silenced more than it saved. He did not know, but he also knew that without it they would all be dead. So he chose to be grateful. He often stood at the same window on the Citadel, where he had once watched the galaxy burn. Now it glowed softly under human order. Sometimes he imagined Ethan somewhere on Earth looking at the same stars, both of them, knowing that history had turned its page and that the next one was already being written. Kalen whispered a quiet hope, that when it came it would not be written in fire but in light, the light that humanity had carried across the void, and the light that still burned, even when everything else had faded.